So I'm pleased once again to introduce Paul Roland, as previously described, the maestro of the macabre, my occult uncle, as I tell my friends and nearest and dearest. Paul, you have once again returned to the crypt here beneath the medieval city of Ely, and we're going to look today quite specifically at your incredible, prolific creative output. I have never known a musician to produce quite so many tracks, an author almost on the publishing level of Sir Terry Pratchett, with the proliferation of your texts, and on an incredibly wide array of subjects. To give people a small flavour, you have written albums themed entirely around the Munsters. You have referenced the occult. You have also been at times described as the godfather of steampunk. Let's look now at that musical output first and foremost, which is how you and I were first introduced to each other. A friend of mine said, I think you'll really like the work of Paul Roland, and gave me I will admit, bootlegged copy of Gargoyles. How does this esoteric, this occult, this spiritual, however you want to label that, and however people feel comfortable labeling it, how would you say that has influenced your musical output?
Well, it's just a preoccupation or an obsession, really, that spurs my imagination. It's a world that I can delve into that's replete with larger than life characters, eccentric characters, odd characters, grotesques, where unusual things or unnatural things, if you like, supernatural things can happen in the ordinary world. That's why I'm quite attracted to, say, Lovecraft, because he created a very recognizable New England in the 1920s, but inhabited it with these eldritch horrors, these dark gods who were just under the surface and were looking to break into our world. I also found the same sort of thing earlier when I was about 9 by reading H.G. Wells, much more sort of subtle, if you say, and certainly less horrific. He called them scientific romances. But the idea that either Martians could come to the suburbs of London and destroy it and throw ordinary people's life into chaos was quite appealing, because his language was very beautiful, eloquent, described an idyllic Edwardian England, which did appeal to me, where things move slower. Or that's our impression of it anyway, and people were very polite to each other and so on. And then you throw in these Martians, or you throw in somebody who experiments with chemicals and becomes the Invisible Man, or they have some other accident in a laboratory and they can see remote viewing, if you like, into an island somewhere where things happen. It was about all these wonders, about ordinary life didn't have to be mundane. Wonderful things could happen to people, and he described it so well and so logically that you didn't feel it was something that was contrived. He led up to this by describing people as very ordinary, and that was part of the appeal. They were the ordinary man, the common man, if you like, and then extraordinary things happened to them. And I wanted to put that into my music. I didn't want to talk about my own feelings. So many other people do that, and they do it much better than I could. I didn't want to talk about the world we live in, because again, you had people like Paul Weller and Ray Davies, and everybody, Bruce Springsteen. Everybody would have a view, a personal view, and a feeling, an empathy for ordinary people, if you like, that they'd met. And I didn't have this. I lived in a sort of ivory tower. I was quite isolated. So I lived in my own head. I think this is really the answer. So I'd be watching films, reading comics, horror comics, DC horror comics, which were beautifully illustrated and brought to life by artists like Bernie Wrightson, and they were just fantastical in the real sense of the word. And I wanted to put that kind of element and the quality of that language that I read in the novels together with music once I discovered it. I began by writing short stories in the Wells sort of fashion when I was about 9. I think The Silver Man was my first one I wrote in bed at night. It was a compulsion. It still is a compulsion. So when you ask me, how can you be so prolific? The answer is I can't stop. It's fun. That's the thing. And it's not work. A lot of work goes into the albums. When I look back, when I finish an album and I look back, I think, my goodness, from the writing stage to the mixing, so many hours went in, so many ideas are in here. But I didn't look at it like that at the time. It's just, as I say, it's great fun. I think any creative person finds what they're doing fun, otherwise they wouldn't do it. So commercial success, critical success, is irrelevant. It really is. Yes, it gives you pleasure that other people appreciate what you've done and maybe get the joke in some of my more wistful or whimsical songs. But a lot of my music appeals to non-native English speakers, and they don't seem to mind. I don't mind them not getting the small points, the little in jokes and so on. I think that they latch onto the title, they latch onto the sound, they get some imagery. I mean, they obviously understand to different degrees, but even those who don't speak much English at all, I think they hear it in the voice, they hear the cinematic the scenes that I conjure up through the use of certain instruments, and so they're immersed in this horror movie or horror comic of the mind, if you like. And I think that's why I get such ardent admirers who stick with me for a long time, or who spread the word and get very enthusiastic, because they feel they found something that's very different. Now, I never set out to do that, as I say. All I set out to do was to create the music that I wanted to hear and to write. I don't know what the condition is called, but there is an illness in which you can't stop scribbling on the walls or anything. And I think I've probably got maybe part of that. But I'm very lucky that melody comes to me so easily. And then I have these ambitions now, now that I'm at a certain stage, where a 3-minute song isn't enough, and I wanted to extend them and have what I call narrative songs. So it might be a 10-minute, 8-minute, 12-minute song in segments, telling a short story that I based on, say, Montague Rhodes James' ghost stories, our great English ghost story writer, or Poe or Lovecraft, as I've done, and then I might feel that I don't want to do a song now. I want to do a theatre piece. So I wrote a Gothic ballet, Nosferatu, but from a different point of view. I always have to justify what I'm doing. I don't want to repeat anything. So I'm saying, what could I do that's different from somebody else's? So the Gothic ballet, for example, was from the point of view of Jonathan Harker, that he imagined the whole experience on Transylvania because, well, I won't spoil it for you, but that was a different angle. And then I adapted Carmilla, the Sheridan Le Fanu novella about a female vampire, for a chamber opera, because I felt it was time to do that. I wanted to stretch myself. I was restless. I don't want to repeat myself, as I said, and I don't want to stay within the same limited field, as enjoyable as that might be. I can go back to it later, but I want to see what can I do with it, and particularly if I have something that presents an opportunity. For example, a keyboard with various say art sounds or something, and I play with it and I find, oh, that's interesting, I could do something, and out of this grows like the grim fantasy I did for orchestra. I mean, I'm not a classical composer in the conventional sense. I can't read or write music. I mean, I can recognize the notes and everything, but I wouldn't be able to read it fast enough to play. So I know about music, and I've read and heard a great deal classical music and everything because I'm restlessly curious, and I don't have any restrictions about what I like. I want to like things that initially I don't like say Benjamin Britten or Harrison Birtwistle or something. I like difficult things. I like to struggle with them and overcome them, if you like. So I found, how do I get into this opera, for example? Well, if it's very contemporary and it's very difficult, I found a technique. You just listen to the first 5 or 10 minutes over and over and over again, and once you've got it, then you can hear the rest of it. Not just to hear the whole 3 because of course you're not going to get that. It's all going to sound like a splurge of notes, you know. And so just concentrate on one little piece. So that's how I tackle both my own musical education, if you like, and out of that comes me wanting to do something of my own, but recognizing my own limitations, that I can't read or write music, that I can't play all these instruments, but I have keyboards at my command. And I think any means to an end, if the end is justified, I'm not worried if it doesn't sound like real instruments. If it sounds enough like real instruments to convey what I'm trying to get across, I've succeeded. And people have said to me after classical musicians I've worked with, oh, it doesn't matter. In fact, sometimes we can't tell if it's real instruments or not. It's the way you use them and within the normal range. So you have to have a certain musical intelligence or sensibility to do this. If you use it as a keyboard, then all you've done is create one of these keyboard noodling ambient albums, which are lovely, but it's not what I wanted to do. I wanted something with a strong melodic sense, a strong rhythmic sense, and I created the Anubis engine like that, which was a sort of steampunk concept album, like Stargate, that an ancient civilization, extraterrestrial civilization, would send their dead through this portal to Earth in ancient times, and they would be revived on Earth, if you like, so a reversal of a heaven kind of a thing. And then the people on Earth would imagine these were the gods, and that's how they created their pantheon of Egyptian gods and pharaohs. So there always has to be an idea behind something. I think that's the thing. Even my songs, they always had to have an idea. And when I wrote some of my earliest songs, say Flying Ace, for example, it's because I'd seen somebody with a disfigured face. It was probably from a car accident, but I didn't know that. My immediate thought was, oh, he's a pilot, a crashed war ace from a dogfight. But of course, it couldn't have been because it was in the 1970s. But the poor chap just probably had a car accident or what have you, or his wife maybe hit him over the head with a bottle. But the effect was, and this is the point really, it doesn't matter what the reality is. It's, in my mind, this was a disfigured fighter ace with a sad past, and I wanted to put him into a song. So I think you've got to have an idea in songs to propel them along, to give them a kernel of truth that people can latch onto. If you just say, I saw her walking down the street, wasn't she sweet? Well, we've had that in the early 60s, and I mean, I don't think anybody does that anymore anyway, but, well, I've heard an awful lot of contemporary pop that is, you wonder, did they actually sit down and write anything on more than a napkin, in the tea break? Because it doesn't make any sense, or it's very trite. So that doesn't appeal to me at all. But then again, I'm not making music for that audience either. My audience tends to be people who are older, have read a lot, seen a lot of subtitled foreign films, as I have. The thinking people, the people who want something more out of music than simply, a nice tune and, whatever, the vibe.
So I'm assuming that we can officially put to bed the rumours of the Paul Roland Undercover album, where you'll be covering Pink Pony Club and something from the back catalogue of, I don't know, one of the great musical luminaries of the age, such as Beyonce. I'm saddened to see that we won't get the Paul Roland version of All the Single Ladies.
No, you won't. But I must say, I never ever criticize anybody else. I mean, I wouldn't do that because, who am I to do it anyway? I haven't had any hits. I still sell in small quantities. I'm what they call a niche artist. But I'm proud of being that because I think if I'd been signed, as I thought I would have to be when I was younger, to a major label, I wouldn't have been able to write the songs I've written because I wouldn't have had the space, the encouragement all the time. I'd have been told, oh, we need a song like this for the radio. We need you to go on tour, and so that pressure. I can't work under that sort of pressure. I put myself under pressure, and that's a very sort of healthy thing. That gives me momentum, if you like, and stimulus. But working to somebody else's diary, if you like, is it's just contrary to the creative impulse, and a lot of people have been burned by that.
I will admit, knowing you and having worked with you on a number of projects now, your diary, your time frame and time scale is something to behold. It is similar to standing in the jet stream as the great Roland carries on and you stand there grabbing the papers that have blown out of your hands. He's finished his part and he's already working on project B, C and D.
Well, as I said, it's just fun. I mean, I don't think like that at all. You see, there's no limit to the amount of things we can create. I mean, I've written 3 novels too, which in the past I would have thought, how on earth could I do that? Well, when I wrote the Anubis Engine, the electronic album, my first thought was, how do you write an electronic album? Where do you start? Well, I found a starting point. The ARP buttons gave me patterns. From the patterns, I created and I added to. I made sure there was melodic phrases in there, and out of one melodic phrase came this sort of Arabic Eastern phrase, and that gave me the idea for the whole ancient Egyptian thing. So that's how these sort of things work. They sort of work by accident, but you have to be there. You have to buy a ticket to win the lottery, right? You can't just you have to put yourself in this place, and you also have to believe that it's going to come. I mean, there's never any doubt in my mind when I pick up an instrument that I'm going to write something. It's a question of, is it going to be good enough? And if it isn't, the next one will be. It's just this, I think it's a bit like, either a child, there has to be a sort of child-like aspect to this. Children draw, they're not inhibited. They don't think, oh, what will mum and dad think about this? They think, oh, I'm going to draw mum and dad, and it might look like a pineapple on legs, but mum and dad are going to be delighted, of course. So I suppose I've got that attitude, because nobody's ever told me that I'm rubbish or I ought to stop, or, well, somebody sort of once did tell me to, slow down and produce something else, but that was way back, and that was very hurtful. Maybe it was helpful in the end, but the idea is that always there's untold options here. I don't, just because there's 8 notes and X number of chords or something, it doesn't mean you're going to be following these. I think that's the secret with songwriting, I find it, is you find a little detour, a little inflection or an intonation that's slightly off. So you're not singing with the chords, you're singing around the chords, if you like. It's a bit like when an actor says their lines, they can say it in so many ways, they riff on it, as they say, they put the emphasis on different parts. And if you do that with music, in an uninhibited way, I just open my mouth and boom, out it comes. Then you're likely to hit something unexpected and interesting. That's what music is, really, isn't it? At its best, something unexpected and interesting. If you play with the chords and sing with the chords, you'll end up, well, I don't want to say status quo because I quite like their early stuff, but you'll have something that's very conventional. You have something that's very obvious, almost like a nursery rhyme that resolves itself. Well, there's no surprise in that. I mean, this is basic. Everybody, I think, knows this, but this is the joy or the pleasure of creation. Creating anything, painting or whatnot. You get the same colours. You paint the same subject as your neighbour in the class, but if you see things slightly different, or you expect something more interesting to happen, not because you're a genius or brilliant or or gifted even, just because you're uninhibited, I think. And it's this play aspect. I'm playing with words. I'm playing with music, and so it's a pleasure. It's never time. Sometimes look, 4 a.m. Oh, I haven't gone to bed yet. But I've had this great thing. Then I go to bed. I'm not only tired. I'm completely satisfied. But I've produced something. At the end of every day, I say, what have I done? I've done this, and certain things that need to be done. For the family or what have you. But I always want to have created something, whether it's a half a chapter in a novel or some musical thing, and I can't see any other point in living, frankly.
I'm gonna take a leaf out of the Paul Roland playbook here, and I'm going to ask you some short, sharp questions to which I want short, sharp answers.
Okay, I'll behave, Matthew.
Some of them I think this is a nice way to see the influences that you've had in your musical career. So we'll start off. I don't want to give it some trite title like Desert Island Discs, or should it in fact be CDs from the Crypt? But
why not?
Favourite album produced by someone else?
So many. Well, off the top of my head, I'd say In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson, because I love the fantasy theme. I don't mind the pretentious lyrics. They were very much of the period, witches and kings and crumbling castles and whatnot. The melodious, mellifluous voice of Greg Lake is very appealing, and the cross hybrid of mishmash, if you like, a mashup of styles of prog, even some jazz in there, in the quirky rhythms, polyrhythms, and rock, and some pastoral folk in there as well. So all those things together make it an album that is, I couldn't do without that one anyway.
Okay, thank you. This is probably going to be like asking you to choose between your two wonderful sons, but favourite Paul Roland album?
No, I couldn't. Well, I'll say I'll choose one, to please you. But I can't really choose just one. I would say probably Lair of the White Worm, because it has all the elements that I wanted to work with, and they all work, and they work together. The musicians are wonderful on it. Mick Crossley, the guitarist, Violet the Cannibal, the drummer, and the guest singers, Elaine, Joran Elaine, who's a German sort of neo-folk, dark folk singer. She brings a sort of dark, witchy vocal to it, which is very appropriate. And then Anna Barbaza, my Italian bass player and singer in the band I've got over there, she brings a more sort of angelic, pure tone. So you have these two contrasting colours in there as well. I was very pleased with all the songs. They're all very strong, and it even has a 10-minute sort of almost semi-prog, proto-prog track at the end, in the title track, Lair of the White Worm. And I like all the vocal things. I did the harmonies. Again, the harmonies are something like when writing songs that I just do in the studio. I just open my mouth and out they come. And if I don't like something, I would try another one, and then it will be interesting from there. So that was a gift, if you like, that I didn't think I had, and that only came in the last few years, really. And that album has that as well. So I think there's nothing weak on it. There's everything that's very strong. I'm very, very delighted with it.
Okay.
Sorry, you said a short answer.
I long ago gave up trying to control you. Let's say somebody has discovered you on you're on
Bandcamp.
Bandcamp. Thank you very much. What is the song that you would want people to introduce Paul Roland? What is the song?
Well, if I had to go for a rock song, it would probably be Reanimator, because it's psych pop, baroque pop, and it's got the Lovecraft theme, if you like, subject. So that covers a lot of ground. So if I had to choose one, I think that would appeal to more people than maybe another one would.
That is the Paul Roland gateway drug.
Right, but I also have this other schizophrenic aspect, which is the acoustic stuff, and I'd have to say something like maybe the Great Edwardian Air Raid or Windham Hill. They're sort of interchangeable in a way, because they're the wistful acoustic pastoral folk and the Edwardian historical aspect to my other songs.
Which I know you've alluded to earlier. You mentioned this enjoyment, this sense of connection with that Edwardian pace of life, the promenade through the country park, the sailboats on the ornamental lakes, and yet you, in almost, when trying to explain you to my partner, who you've met briefly, the easiest description I was able to kind of produce, and I hope you won't be offended by this comparison, is that in a way you're a slightly less grumpy, more approachable musical equivalent of Alan Moore, the comic book artist. And if you know me, you know that's a great sort of
compliment, yeah.
Because he does as you do, which is weave perfectly this combination of the whimsy, of the whimsical, whimsy not being a derogatory term, but this idyllic. And as you talked about H.G. Wells, there's this idyllic picture on the wall, if you want to imagine that, of an Edwardian family promenading, the lady wearing that traditional dress, the gentleman in his hat, and then in the background is something that has come from Mars. And that sums up almost, as it were, the surprise. This series you named Paul Roland's Cabinet of Curiosities, and I think that is emblematic of your career and your creative output. You open that cabinet and in it you find a wide variety of experiences of creative output. Let's not forget, we've talked extensively now about your music, which is a huge part. Your books, both non-fiction and fiction, which has been a later endeavour in your career that I've been incredibly honoured to be at the foundry stage, as it were, with you sending me some very early pieces of work. And we've looked at how that creative output is there, and it is a fascinating one. You are this collection, as we all are, of experiences, and how you've woven that in. We'll end that bit there, and I'll say once again, thank you so much for your time and joining us here in this former ossuary, Bone Room, beneath the streets of Ely in Cambridgeshire, kindly hosted by Julia's Tea Rooms, because you've got to get the shameless plug in there.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Matthew.